Good afternoon, everyone. We are right on time, starting officially at 12 o'clock. And so, for those that don't know, you're joining us for our Brown Bag series. And so, if you're not interested in transportation, we're going to get you more interested by the end of the session today. So, my name is Lakeisha Hull. I'm the Prince George's County Planning Director. Super excited that many of you are joining us today virtually. We still have seats available here at Largo headquarters, and so feel free to come during the hour if you like to be able to participate and also mix and mingle with us staff here at the office. So for those that have been following, we have this series every month on different topics. We started it last year in the summertime, and so we're now midway through the series and super excited that you guys are participating with us each time. And so we have a couple more sessions left of the series before we start to think about our next wave of series that's going to happen in the fall. So for this session here, feel free using the chat to put in any of your questions, comments, anything that you need to click clarification on, any requests you want the planning department to work on as well on this topic. And so with that being said, we have a very, very great topic on what we're trying to do with our transportation review guidelines. Many of you guys are following our efforts here with transportation. For those that can see, we have a draft update to our master plan of transportation, which is one of the key documents that our department is using that helps to move forward these type of guidelines. By the end of the month, we'll have this document ready for the public to peruse and also provide comments as well. So with that, I'm going to turn over to staff to do the presentation.
All right, I'm going to start off today with a quick recap of last session that was on transportation procedures. Crystal Hancock, supervisor of the transportation planning section, gave a great presentation, and those who attended received a copy of the presentation. If you are interested in receiving a copy, please ask at the end of this session. If you're virtual, please drop your request in the chat. We will be sending an email to those attending today with the slides and a link to the recorded presentation after today's session. Ms. Hancock presented last month on transportation procedures, including bicycle and pedestrian impact statements. She also discussed the current project, Go Prince George's, Transportation Master Plan, transportation including pedestrian and bikeways, adequacy, level of service, and project scoping. And we'll be starting off today's session with an icebreaker.
They might see it online.
Okay, do you see it? If you see it online, the first icebreaker should be, have you ever submitted a, let me see what it says. Have you ever completed a traffic study? So please answer yes or no and click on the submit button. All right, so far we have 15 responses and it's growing. All right, well, we're going to close that, and the results were 60% said no. So the second icebreaker is we're going to do a word cloud and have you, what is your favorite bike trail? Now please put your word in and click submit. If you see one of your paths already up there, you can click on the word and it will just double the number of responses. Oh, so we have a bunch up there. Anacostia, Henson Creek, Northwest Branch. And if you can't get these two polls to work, if you just want to put your answer in the chat, we can collect them later. So do you want to close the word button? Okay, so today's session, and thank you for participating in the icebreakers. Today's session focuses on transportation review guidelines. Next month, the topic will be CB 15 and transitional provisions. I'd like to remind you that registration opens at the end of today's session and closes 1 week in advance of the date of the next session, which is March 4th. So please register by March 4th. Please register in advance. This one should be, registration may close early because of how popular it will be. With that, I'd like to introduce Crystal Hancock, Supervisor of Transportation Planning Section.
Thank you, Marion. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us, and we're here just to talk a little bit about some of the transportation review guidelines, as we mentioned here. The transportation review guidelines that were developed by the Transportation Planning Section are the implementation of the implementation, of the general plan and the master plan of transportation. Right. So our transportation review guidelines are, as I mentioned, the implementation of the general plan and the master plan of transportation, which is we currently have one, as well as the one that we're preparing, which our Director Hall just mentioned will be updated and released at the end of this month. So what we affectionately call as TRG, the Transportation Review Guidelines, evaluate adequacy of transportation facilities. It also is it works in conjunction with the Prince George's General Plan 2035, as well as it reflects the transportation service areas, which a lot of this information we went over last time on our last session, as well as complete streets policies. And how do we achieve traffic adequacy? Traffic adequacy, or what we know as Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, or APFO, ensures the adequacy and concurrency of public facilities. APFO identifies ways for development application can contribute to achieving adequacy. Our APFO regulations, are contained within our subdivision ordinance of Section 244500. It applies to all preliminary subdivision plans and plat applications. We also have, since this is about transportation adequacy, we go into various levels of detail regarding adequacy. So first, we talked about previously the subdivision ordinance, Section 244505A2 indicates that the proposed development shall demonstrate the level of service standards from that section to provide mitigation if applicable, And then we also talked about 244505B, which indicates that adequate facilities should be available to accommodate or offset vehicular trips within a transportation impact area. We also want to talk just a little bit about the transportation level of service. It indicates that it is a qualitative measure that applies and uses a sequence of letters to describe the quality of operational conditions with an intersectional roadway. This is a nationwide standard. This is not something that we developed on our own, but more of a nationwide standard that we're adhering to. And how to achieve our adequacy, we're working through our subdivision regulations as well as our general plan, or Plan 2035. And again, adequacy is met when the critical intersections operate within an acceptable volume of levels and delay identified within the policies and standards outlined in the previous documents that I've mentioned. Again, our signalized intersections, we talked about level of service, what volume, with a level of service A through a level of service F. This information again comes from a variety of sources, but mainly this one came through our previous transportation review guidelines and is in conjunction with the highway capacity manual, one of the standards that we also use, as well as our subdivision ordinance. And if you remember last time at our meeting, I asked a question which nobody answered, so I'm here to give you the answer. We talked a little bit about our adopted level of service, which we talked about. Our TSA 1 is generally within the Beltway. TSA 2 is generally, not always, but generally between the Beltway and US 301 or Maryland 3. And then TSA 4 is outside generally of TSA 3. So we've identified in this section where some of the centers are located, and it identifies with the level of service and the critical lane volumes that are available or allowed within the area. We also talked a little bit about our RTO or regional transit. Sorry, I gotta refer to my notes on that one. A regional transit oriented, zone. I zoned out on the O for oriented, so excuse me. And our LTO, which is our local transit oriented zone, and our PD, which is our planned development. Those are in those areas. They also allow a higher level of service, which we allow in F, because that allows that encourages more walkability, and with walkability and bicycle access. But the question that I asked the last time is, how many regional transit districts do we have? And the answer to that is 8. We have 8 of them. The 8 that we've identified are Hyattsville Crossing, New Carrollton, Downtown Largo, Suitland, Branch Avenue Metro, College Park, University of Maryland, Greenbelt Metro, and National Harbor. So I just wanted to bring a little full circle moment from our ties in from the last time. So, okay. Next, we wanted to talk just a little bit about some of the traffic, how we analyze traffic. Some of that is through signalized as well as unsignalized intersections, the analysis that we conduct. So through unsignalized intersections, we have a tiered approach, which is an indicator, of operational studies that we do. If the test below, which we're going to talk about, whether it's a two-way stop control or an all-way stop control, whether it's through a stop sign or not, just people stopping at the sign. That's what we'll talk just a little bit about. It could be if these qualifications aren't met that we discussed that are discussed below. A signal warrant analysis study is required. So for our two-way stop control sections, there's a 3-part process that we have to take a look at. If the vehicle delay is computed in all movements using the highway capacity manual, the maximum approach to the volume is the minor streets are computed. If delay exceeds 50 seconds, and if delay exceeds the 50 seconds, 1 or 2 approaches we have to do yet another test. If for an all-way, there's a 2-part process that looks at, so we look at vehicle delay of all movements, as well as if the delay exceeds 50 seconds, then we have to then do a CLV or critical lane volume analysis. Again, this just shows that we don't just kind of make this information up, is that we're working within the general guidelines of our profession. Next, we have meeting level of service. And then it just we just want to talk through just a little bit about how we revise project, what can happen if mitigation is required, You could the applicant could revise the project to reduce the number of impacts that occur, which could include reducing the number of dwelling units, reducing the floor area, or incorporate other alternative tips so that less trips are coming through an area. What could happen also are transportation improvements. It could be the applicant decides to construct an additional lane. The applicant could install a right turn lane. They could install a right in or right out lane, something that allows traffic to flow smoother. It could be a trip reduction program that allows developments in certain parts to modify roadways that could improve traffic operations. It could be through an LTO or RTO, which we just talked about, was a local transit-oriented zone or a regional transit-oriented zone, and there could be some financial contributions. Other capacity could be available. It could be a fee in lieu of a payment. It could also be our PFFIP, which we'll go through just a little bit of, as well as our Brandywine Road Club or some capital improvement projects that are required. Next, we have our evaluation procedures. So there are three things that we look at in terms of addressing transportation. One is we look at a de minimis impact. We also look at whether a traffic study is required and if traffic counts are required. There are certain criteria that are allowed for all three of those items. So a de minimis impact, let me go back to a transportation checklist. A checklist has to be submitted to determine what method will be used, whether it's a de minimis, whether traffic counts are required, or a traffic impact study is required. It all starts with our checklist. A de minimis project is a project that will generate less than 5 trips in the AM and PM hour, which is why we call it a de minimis, and no analysis is required, and adequacy is assumed that adequacy is met. This information can be contained within our 2022 Transportation Review Guidelines, also the TRG I mentioned earlier, but it does require a transportation checklist. Also an ITE rates can be used because sometimes there are uses or land uses that are not included in our TRG that may be in ITE. So for a traffic impact study, any development that is projected to have over 50 trips, AM or PM trips, they are required to do a traffic impact study. And again, we use the trip generation rate, again from our 2022 Transportation Review Guidelines or from ITE, as well as it requires a scoping meeting and a scoping agreement with the development application. So project scoping, we talked a little bit about it in our last meeting, but our project scoping contains, we have a set a meeting. It's every other Tuesday, which we'll go into a little bit, every other Tuesday. But we have meeting attendance. The attendees include whoever the applicant is or their traffic consultant or traffic staff. It includes county agencies, municipalities, as well as the State Highway Administration. Some of the determinations that are looked at in the meeting are access points. What are the critical intersections? What's the trip distribution? What are the growth rates that are used, as well as what background developments are in the area, and if there are any internal trip or pass-by as required as a part of the study. The other approvals that we receive, the other key thing to note is that our staff, the planning department, the transportation planning section has a final say. We do coordinate with the other agencies. Can you not hear me?
No, you're good.
Oh, sorry. We do coordinate with other agencies to get their professional expertise also. So we do that, but I also want to go back to our scoping meetings are held every other Tuesday, so not this Tuesday today. But the materials are due by 12 o'clock noon today for us to go ahead and share that with our agency and municipality partners. What does that mean?
Sorry, we do have an online question.
Okay.
When you were talking about the trips, are the 5 trips only vehicle trips?
Yes. Thank you. I didn't know what that meant, so thank you. We didn't work on that beforehand. Okay, sorry, yes. So our operating and permitting agencies, they may request additional information to help with the analysis that they need to conduct, as well as they also help with some of the proposed mitigation. Also, any background improvements, background developments are projects or improvements, are any projects that are fully funded by Prince George's County improvement program, or the Maryland Department of Transportation with their Consolidated Transportation Plan, which is a CTP. So they can be considered also with the materials that we look at. Critical intersections are additional known, any specific problematic intersections that the team knows about. And we do drive around the county, so we are aware of a lot of the issues that are occurring. But we also, that's why we work with our partners in the municipalities so that they can share ideas also for things that we should look forward to. And the data should not be more than 1 year at the time of acceptance. That is the traffic, either the traffic counts or the traffic impact study. The counts that are used for those documents should not be older than 1 year, 1 year old. But it can be, but it has to be, the information has to be heard within the planning board within 2 years. So if I submitted a project in January of 2023 that had January 2023 counts that I have not gone to the planning board yet, and I'm planning to go to the planning board in February or March of 2025, your counts are too old. So that's something to look at also. That's why we always request updated counts. And again, I talked a little bit about this. This is our diagram to talk through a traffic impact study. We look at existing conditions and the data collection, which we talked about existing volumes, that's where those traffic counts come from. Any intersection geometry. We also look at some of the background conditions. What are the annual growth? What are some of the pipeline projects? So if we had a development in area A, we also want to know about within area A, what other projects are proposed in that area? What are the improvements that they're looking at so that we can coordinate some of the improvements? And then in total, we get a total future condition, which looks at generation, pass by plan, distribution. We look at all kinds of stuff. So this is an example of a TIS package. It identifies, I'll just go here, sort of the trip generation rate, what we're looking at. It also identifies what are some of the background projects. This is the site in particular, but here are some of the additional background projects that are considered as a result of this. We also look at some of the peak hour volumes and the peak and the traffic counts, as well as over here, it kind of looks at some of the background traffic, some of the things that we talked about earlier. So I did want to show an example of that. The next, we talked about traffic counts. And they're also required for projects that are within 5 and 50 trips. Peak hour trips, AM or PM trips. And again, the information, the trip generation rates are included from our transportation review guidelines, the 2022 version, as well as the ITE rates. And again, this requires a transportation checklist to identify critical intersections. What's different about this, the traffic counts is not required that they have a scoping meeting, but is strongly encouraged. Some of the things that we talk about in those meetings are determinations, again, regarding access points that are required, any other critical intersections. It also takes a look at, again, confirms that the planning department does have the final say, but we do include ideas and thoughts from our other partners, as well as we look at a list of the proposed developments and locations. And our rule of thumb for our scoping documents is we're also looking at nearest off-site serving a majority of traffic. We also look at what would have 20 or more trips, what would have 35 or more trips. So we're constantly looking at the number of trips that each development is proposing. We also include our critical lane volume analysis for existing and background conditions for all signalized intersections. Because the unsignalized intersections has another process that we follow. And we also include the highway capacity manual analysis for existing background and total conditions for all unsignalized intersections. So we analyze both signalized and unsignalized intersections. And again, here's an example of traffic counts, which here's the site again. Here's our level of service results. Here are our counts over here, and here's the analysis that we look at for unsignalized intersection. Oh, did I do that? Yeah, I did that. Okay, so in achieving transportation adequacy, again, we just work through our information regarding our Plan 2035, our subdivision regulations, as well as the adequacy is met at critical intersections. Other procedures that we follow for places of worship, we also analyze traffic, but we analyze the traffic in a different manner. For locations that are less than 20,000 square feet, we look traffic counts. We look at traffic counts at the beginning of the hour and the end of the hour. We also look at what day. Those traffic counts are based on the day of worship when they have the largest amount of trips. We also look for places that are 20,000 square feet or greater. We look for a TIS, just because of the amount of the vast amount of the facility, the sheer size of it, and the amount of people that may be coming. And places that, and if this place of worship has like a daycare or a school, then it has to include some weekday analysis also, because no longer are you just using it for a worship on an identified date. You're now using it also daily with the additional use. Again, we talked a little bit about our public facilities financing and implementation program, which is commonly called the PFFIP. And if you haven't guessed by now, we have lots of acronyms in transportation, lots of them. And this program was established by CR 6622-2010. It implements it implements a way for a facility to be constructed with the development of these, for the development in a specific area. It could include financing strategies. It could include financing for the Maryland 4 area, for construction, and it's based on each development has a percentage of daily trips that they generate, and based on that, their trips that go through an intersection, the applicant has to pay a fee for that. We also previously discussed the Brandywine Road Club, which is CR 60-1993. It establishes an alternate mechanism to alleviate traffic concerns, and it allows a payment into the Brandywine Road Club to alleviate inadequacy of impacted intersections. And the applicant must enter a developer participation agreement with the county to share cost of improvement. And this fee fully satisfies the adequacy requirement in the Brandywine area. Also, in the Route 1 corridor, we look at critical intersections are identified by 3 segments. And the segments are between Cherry Hill Road, so 193, including Cherry Hill Road, between Maryland 193, Paint Branch Parkway, Campus Drive, not including Paint Branch Campus Drive, as well as the Guilford Drive area and the Paint Branch Parkway area. So they have to have the average peak period LOS, level of service is the average CLV, and the LOS for this area is 1600, which we talked about as a level of service E. Now, achieving pedestrian and bicycle adequacy, because we don't just look at transportation or vehicular, we also look at pedestrian and bicycle adequacy. So our adequacy is also located in subdivision ordinance 244506, where pedestrian and bikeway features include integrated sidewalk, trail and bikeway facilities in an effort to divert automobile trips and increase multimodal accessibility, which is what we're always looking for. Pedestrian and bikeway facilities should be designed to increase safety for people walking, bicycling, and using transit, and offer the most direct routes to destinations for persons of all abilities. What we also look is that typically the rule of thumb within the industry is that we look at bike facilities that are within a half a mile of a subdivision. If the board finds that there's a demonstrated nexus to require the applicant to connect a pedestrian or bicycle facility to a nearby destination, and that's when we look at sort of what is in the area. Is that public schools, parks, shopping centers? What are the ways that we can get people out of their car? How can we encourage bicycle and pedestrian activity and creating the multimodality that we so desire in the county? The other thing is the analysis that we look at is the development applications are subject to pedestrian and bicycle analysis, and they provide off-site improvements also. So our evaluation procedures, very similar to the TIS, we have what we have called a bicycle and pedestrian impact statement. It's exempt when it's exempt and when it's applicable. So our BPIS, again, here's our acronym again. It includes off-site and on-site pedestrian and or bicycle improvements are required. So it's a lot of times when we look at new developments, that's what we're looking for. We're trying to make sure that there's sidewalk connections, that there are bike facilities that are able to connect to something. So it requires a signed scope and agreement. It also is a meeting, we also have a BPIS meeting that is at the same time in most cases as the TIS meeting. They're considered two separate meetings. And it's required for any development locating in the following zones. If the development is not located in one of these zones, we cannot require the BPIS for that development. Again, here is an example of our BPIS scoping form. It identifies our location, what is the development proposal, what is the cost cap, what is there's a copy of a BPIS map, what are some of the trip generators that are near the area of the application, what are some of the nearby corridors, and if there have been any discussion with any of the previous agencies. Because what we want to know is that, have you been in contact with another agency, so that if we need to reach out to them, we can also reach out to them also. This is an example of our BPIS map that identifies the site as well as the location in a 1.5 mile radius. So here in this example is our site, and all around here are areas that we're looking at. What we're looking at is what are some of the trip generation, some of the trip generators? Are these malls? Are they planned facilities? What are some of the nearby corridors? What else is the applicant requesting? What does does our staff have comments that can be included, or suggestions or recommendations? Again, we live and work in the county, so we are looking at, we're all throughout. We look at a lot of different areas around the county. We don't know them all. I will say that we don't know them all, but we are familiar. So again, this is the same thing we do project scoping. If there are 11 or more redeveloped dwelling units that are located within the zones that were mentioned before, or 1,001 or greater square feet of newer redeveloped gross floor area, we're requesting the BPIS. Also, if they're existing, we're looking at gaps of sidewalks. If your BPIS can make a connection, we are looking towards that. If it can identify, we're looking to identify local trip generators as well as master plan facilities. We also we do understand that it does cost to do these things, so there is a cost cap associated that occurs with the development, and the formula is that is 35 cents per square feet plus $300 per dwelling unit. That is the amount, the base amount for any BPIS project. Again, so the applicant, we ask the applicant to recommend improvements that have a nexus to development. We also have off-site improvements, so they're on-site and off-site improvements that include an exhibit with the cost cap, which we just discussed. And all improvements are subject to approval of the permitting agency. Also, applicants are encouraged to meet with permitting agencies for prior concurrence or prioritize desired improvements before submitting their BPIS project. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Because our agency partners are in the meetings, they may say, oh, we have additional items or areas of concern, things you may want to look at. So we do work with our partners on that information. And again, here are just some examples of things that we look at for on and off-site examples, whether it's bike lanes or shared roadway markings, which we call sharrows, whether it's the construction of sidewalk, whether it's the implementation of crosswalks or signalized or unsignalized like we see down here, number 4, whether it's bicycle parking, whether it's a bicycle fix-it station, which we've also requested from a time or two. It could be that there is a bus shelter that we need a bus shelter in a specific area. So we could request that. We can also request ADA or Americans with Disabilities Act curb ramps or a rectangular rapid flashing beacon or RRFB. So these are some of the ideas that we look at and some of the examples. All of them don't fit neatly in this box, but we try, we're open to thinking and forward thinking and we're open to other ideas. That makes sense. And here's an example of a BPIS package. It sort of shows you the same thing again, that here's a bus shelter. It could be that the bus shelter is not ADA accessible. It could be that it's just a sign for a bus stop sign. And it could be that because we feel like for safety reasons, it could be that a bus shelter could be recommended at that location. It could be that it could be a variety of different things. We just want to make sure that it makes sense. Also, we show that here are, in this slide right here, we showed here are some of the ideas that we have been looking at for some improvements. Again, here's the site, and again, that's the cost allocation over in that corner. Thank you, Ryan. And then there's an exemption. So any development that's located within the identified zone but does not meet the development size threshold is exempt from BPIS. And sometimes any developments lot within the identified zone that we had previously shown is not applicable. They do not have to do a BPIS improvements. And that is it. So, Madam Lisa, do we have additional questions?
Would you speak to BPIS requirements that may be required for parks, recreational facilities? No dwelling units, but has potential for traffic impacts, particularly for regional facilities.
I cannot speak on behalf of parks facilities. That's what the question is in terms of parks facilities, but we do work with them. But I don't feel comfortable in speaking on their behalf.
It's only accountable commercial space and
Oh, right.
not park facilities.
Say your question again one more time, please.
Would you speak to BPIS requirements that may be required for parks/recreational facilities? No dwelling units, but has potential for traffic impacts, particularly for regional facilities.
Okay, right. I stand by that because I can't speak for parks, but what our colleague just mentioned is that bicycle and pedestrian adequacy is not. We can't require that because it's only for residential and commercial facilities. So, but I do know that Parks has a mechanism to look through some of the bicycle paths and the work they're doing. Right, they do have the strategic trails plan. Yes. Mm-hmm.
How do you make traffic judgments about increased development traffic that must exist on a narrow residential street where two-way traffic is difficult?
Say it one more time. Mm-hmm.
How do you make traffic judgments about increased development traffic that must exist on a narrow residential street where two-way traffic is difficult?
I have an example in mind, but I won't discuss that example. I can just explain what we did in that case. What we did do is take a look at our best engineering, best transportation planning judgment, look at the requirements for the area, whether it's parking is required. We always know that if the road is currently a two-way road, and that's where some of the coordination that we have with Department of Permits, Inspections, and Enforcement and the Department of Public Works and Transportation. We work in coordination with them, and if it's a state highway or it has impacts on the state highway, we absolutely talk with the Maryland State Highway also. Yeah, right-of-way impacts. Are there any right-of-way impacts? What can we do? Based on our master plan, in some cases, we can request for the applicant to set their project, to move their project curve back some, so that the road is wider to be able to accommodate some of the uses in the existing road.
How is public transportation factored in when it comes to trip count?
Why don't you come up here? Right. So again, we work with Department of Public Works and Transportation, but again, we look at the trip reduction. There's a trip reduction mechanism that we use that accounts for trips that the applicant can use to account for trips. So if there is a new facility that's located near a metro station or near a bus station, there is a section in the code that they can follow, and we consider that as it goes through the development process. Oh, sorry. Thank you again for attending, everyone. I don't know, Deputy Director, would you like to come? Oh, your picture's not on here, so maybe you can't say thank you. No.
Well, I will say thank you, though. But thank you all for attending and chiming in today. I think for myself, this is a great opportunity and for everyone to really learn those transportation review guidelines that are out there. This is like a really big, deep dive into the traffic analysis and studies and the requests that come in. So I appreciate all the questions that have come up today. And we really do appreciate you all. If you all do in the interim do have questions, the contact information for our team is here on the screen today. So please feel free to reach out, contact us here within the planning department. We'll be happy to respond back to you as well. But again, thank you all for joining us today. It's really been a great session when it comes to transportation. And please register for the next session, CB15. That's going to be really important. I know we got a lot of folks who are out there that are really interested in the CB15, those changes out of that council bill and the impacts to the development process. So we really look forward to having each of you to participate as a part of that brown bag session coming up in March. Thanks again. You all have a great rest of your day and stay warm. Thank you.